1. Listening to music. Why do you listen to music? What does it do for you? What do you hope to get out of the experience? Given a moment of free time, most people don't open a newspaper or a book of poetry, they turn on their iPods. Want proof of the allure of music? Next time you're riding on a bus, a train, or the subway, look around. You'll find that about twice as many people are listening to music as are reading. This is true pretty much everywhere around the developed world. But why does music have such universal appeal? Simply said, music has power. Music delights the ears, uplifts the mind, arouses fighters to go to war, strengthens the weak, and disarms bandits. A medieval monk, John of St. Gall, said this about music nearly 1,000 years ago, and little has changed since. Music moves us, and not only to dance. We are moved at a parade more when the military band strikes up a tune than with the passage of silent troops. We tear up at weddings and funerals, not at the sight of the beautiful bride or the draped casket, but when the wedding processional or the funeral dirge begins. We get scared at horror films, not when the images become graphic, but when the music starts to get ominous. For thousands of years, governments and institutions, both public and private, have tried to use the power of music to control our behavior. Think of the four-note, rally motive, played on the loudspeaker at professional sports events to get the crowd and home team energized. Think of the slow, calming classical music played in airports. And did you know that the state of Arizona recently passed a law banning the playing of powerful Beethoven symphonies on car stereos because it makes drivers too aggressive? Sound perception is the most powerful sense we possess. A sudden noise can make us jump out of our seats. And organized sound, music, profoundly affects the way we feel and behave. Watch a video of Craig Wright's Open Yale Course Class Sessions 1 and 2, Introduction and Introduction to Instruments and Musical Genres, at the text website. Hearing music. Briefly defined, music is the rational organization of sounds and silences passing through time. Tones must be arranged in some consistent, logical, and pleasing way before we can call these sounds music, instead of just noise. A singer or an instrumentalist generates music literally by disturbing the environment, by creating vibrations that travel through the air as sound waves. Sound waves radiate out in a circle from their source, carrying with them two types of essential information, pitch and loudness. The speed of vibration within the sound wave determines what we perceive as high and low pitches, and the width of the wave reflects its volume. When the music reaches our brain, that organ tells us how we should feel and respond to the sound. We tend to hear low, slow tones as relaxing, and high, rapid ones as tension-filled. If the sound waves contain strong, regular pulses, we might start to tap our foot or move in sync with the pulse or beat, the groove. Today the vast majority of music that we hear is not live music but recorded sound. Sound recording began in the 1870s with Thomas Edison's phonograph machine, which played what we now call vinyl, or records. During the 1930s, magnetic tape recorders appeared and grew in popularity until the early 1990s, when they were superseded by a new technology, digital recording. In digital recording, all the components of musical sound, pitch, tone, color, duration, volume, and more, are analyzed thousands of times per second, and that information is instantly stored as sequences of binary numbers. With equal speed, this digital data can be reconverted to electrical impulses that are then changed back into analog sound that is amplified by speakers or earphones. Most recorded music now is no longer stored and sold on discs but distributed as MP3 files over the internet. Figure 1.1. A student listening to an MP3 file on an iPod. Copyright picture Net Corbis. Music in your brain. Given all the love songs in the world, we might think music is an affair of the heart. But both love and music are domains of a far more complex vital organ, the brain. When sound waves reach us, our inner ear transforms them into electrical signals that go to various parts of the brain, each analyzing a particular component of the sound, pitch, color, loudness, duration, direction of source, relation to music we've already heard, and so on. Most processing of sounds takes place in the temporal lobe. If we are imagining how the next line of a song will go, that decision is usually reached in the frontal lobe. If we are playing an instrument, we engage the motor center to move our fingers and the visual center to read the notes. As the music proceeds, our brain constantly updates the information it receives, hundreds of times per second. Associative neurons instantly integrate all the data into a single perception of sound. Figure 1.2. The processing of music in our brains is a hugely complex process involving many areas and associated links. The first recognition and sorting of sounds, both musical and linguistic, occurs in large measure in the primary auditory cortex in both the left and right temporal lobes. How music makes us feel, happy or sad, energetic or relaxed, is determined partly by another part of the brain, the amygdala, and by other factors as well. Neurobiologists have observed increased levels of the chemical dopamine in the brain when pleasing music is heard, just as when, say, we eat chocolate. It's not my fault that I like country music, it just sends a rush of dopamine to the part of my brain that controls emotion, your author confesses. Oddly, then, music alters the way we feel just as might a chemical substance, such as a candy bar, a medicine, or a drug. We can acquire the mechanism for a mood-enhancing experience, it seems, either over the counter or over the internet. Have you ever had an old melody suddenly pop into your head, or had a really annoying tune get stuck there? Of course, it happens to us all. Errant data coursing around the hippocampus may be to blame. Although scientists are uncertain exactly how and where all musical data are stored, we know that music and memory are tightly linked. The songs we best remember are those from our adolescence, when hormonal changes caused sonic information to be engraved in our brain forever. Indeed, music is a powerful agent of memory. A familiar tune, whether heard externally or simply remembered, can cause us to think of the good times we have had or the loved ones we have lost. Therapy for Alzheimer's patients, who do not respond to verbal cues, now includes musical stimulation as a way to unlock their past experiences. The chance to relive our lives through music is another reason we choose to put on headphones. To learn more about music and the brain, see a video of Music and the Mind in the YouTube playlist on the text website. Listening to whose music? Popular music. Most people prefer popular music, the music of all the people. Pop CDs and downloads outsell classical recordings by about 20 to 1. But why are young people in particular attracted to popular music? Here are a few responses culled from a recent survey of 100 college students. See if any of these answers resonate with your own experience. Patrick: I use music to change my mood, to calm myself or focus. Rebecca: actually, I listen to music to avoid doing other types of work, it stimulates some parts of my brain while simultaneously relaxing other parts that may be exhausted. Amanda: I hope its groove will drive me or its beauty will center me in some way. Or try to sing along with friends. Henry: it synthesizes and clarifies the emotion that I already feel inside myself. Julio: it's fun and I enjoy it. Rachel: it allows me to share a spiritual and physical experience with fellow human beings. Sarah: decompression. Mood enhancement, relaxation, focus, fun, bonding with friends, these seem to be the principal attractions of popular music. But what about classical music? What does it do for us, and what's the difference between popular and classical music? Classical music. Most of the music discussed in this book is what we call classical music, sometimes referred to as art music because a particular set of skills is needed to perform and appreciate it. Classical music is often regarded as old music, written by dead white men. But this isn't entirely true, no small amount of it has been written by women, and many art composers, of both sexes, are very much alive and well today. In truth, however, much of the classical music we hear, the music of Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms, for example, is old. That is why, in part, it is called classical. We refer to clothes, furniture, and cars as classics because they have timeless qualities of expression, proportion, and balance. So, too, we give the name classical to music with these same qualities, music that has endured the test of time. Given the mass appeal of popular music, why would anyone choose to listen to classical music? To find out, National Public Radio recently commissioned a survey of regular listeners of classical music. Summarized briefly below, in order of importance, are the reasons expressed by classical listeners. Classical music relieves stress and helps the listener to relax. Classical music helps center the mind, allowing the listener to concentrate. Classical music provides a vision of a better world, a refuge of beauty and majesty in which we pass beyond the limits of our material existence. Classical music offers the opportunity to learn about music, about history, and about people. Oddly, except for the last response, the reasons for listening to classical music turn out to be very much the same as those for listening to popular music. But let's examine how classical music differs from popular music. Figure 1.3. Classical music requires years of technical training on an instrument and knowledge of often complicated music theory. Some musicians are equally at home in the worlds of classical and popular music. Juilliard's School of Music, trained Wynton Marsalis can record a Baroque trumpet concerto one week and an album of New Orleans-style jazz the next. He has won 9 Grammy Awards, 7 for various jazz categories and 2 for classical discs. Lynn Goldsmith Corbis. Classical music and popular music compared. Many cultures have their own styles of classical or art music. The much-respected classical music of China, India, and Japan, for example, dates back many centuries. Some cultures also have their own native brand of popular music, such as highlife, which emerged in the 1900s in Ghana, West Africa, or the more recent reggae from Jamaica. Today, Western classical music is taught in conservatories in Beijing, Tokyo, and Singapore, and Western popular music, for good or for ill, has almost drowned out local popular music. But what are the essential differences between the Western classical and popular styles? Here is a brief summary. Classical music relies on acoustic instruments, such as the trumpet, violin, and piano. Popular music often uses mechanically enhanced sounds such as those produced by electrically amplified guitars and basses, electronic synthesizers, and computers. Classical music relies greatly on preset written music, or musical notation, and so the work is to some extent a fixed entity, which will always be performed more or less the same way. Popular music relies more on oral and oral transmission, and the work can change greatly from one performance to the next. Never do we see performers reading from written music at a pop concert. Classical music is primarily, but by no means exclusively, instrumental, with meaning communicated abstractly through sound. Almost all popular music is vocal and makes use of a text, called the lyrics, from which the listener extracts the meaning of the music. In classical music, the rhythmic beat often rests beneath the surface. Popular music foregrounds a recurring, heavy beat. Classical music offers the listener a chance to escape from the everyday world into a realm of abstract beauty. Popular music exists in the real world, its lyrics embracing such issues of contemporary life as love and rejection, racism, and social inequality. Why listen to classical music? Teachers of classical music sometimes use examples from the world of pop for instructional purposes. Popular music may exhibit the basic elements of music in a less complex, more direct fashion. But the process can work the other way, too. We're better to learn about pop beat and rhythm, melody and harmony, and chord changes and textures than in the more challenging world of classical music. If you can learn to hear a bass line in a cantata by Bach, you will then easily hear one in a song by Kanye West. But most important, classical music will reveal to you a brave new world of sound. The energy of a self-taught rock guitarist might be mind-boggling, but if it's real exhilaration you want, why not experience the prodigious speed and hand wizardry of a piano prodigy? Bono's band U2 has 4 members in it. Why not listen to the sound of 60 virtuosos all playing at once? This is what you get when the Cleveland Orchestra plays a Beethoven symphony. Do you like the hot sound of Rihanna? Why not experience the rich, classically trained voice of the equally hot Renee? The power of all this music will transport you. You will hear new patterns and combinations that will transport you to far-off places, and perhaps even blow you away. Exposure to classical music is, in fact, guaranteed to give you at least one new insight into whatever your current favorite type of music may be, whether hearing a theme from a classical opera in a classic rock song or recognizing a series of chords in a country ballad. To be transported by the sound of Renee Fleming's voice as she sings Verdi's Ave Maria from Otello, see the video in the YouTube playlist on the text website. Classical music all around you. You might not think you listen to much classical music, but you do. Vivaldi concertos and Mozart symphonies are played regularly in Starbucks. Portions of Beethoven symphonies serve to animate segments of The Simpsons. A Puccini aria sounds prominently in the best-selling video game Grand Theft Auto, no doubt for ironic effect. And Bizet's seductive habanera from his opera Carmen suggests the character's secret intentions in a season 1 episode of Gossip Girl. What famous composer hasn't had one or more of his best-known works incorporated into a film score to heighten the audience's emotional response? Similarly, classical music is employed for persuasive purposes in radio and television commercials. There it usually acts as a high-end marketing tool designed to encourage rich living. To sell a Mercedes automobile or a De Beers diamond, advertisers realize they need Mozart, not Madonna, to create the mood. Attending a classical concert. There is no better way to experience the splendor of classical music than to attend a live concert. Compared to pop or rock concerts, however, performances of classical music can be rather staid affairs. For one thing, people dress up, not down. At classical events, attendees wear costumes or uniforms of a very different sort than they do at, say, rock concerts. For another, throughout the performance the classical audience sits rigidly, saying nothing to friends or performers. No one sways, dances, or sings along to the music. Only at the end of each composition does the audience express itself, clapping respectfully. But classical concerts weren't always so formal. In fact, they were more akin to professional wrestling matches. In the 18th century, for example, the audience talked during performances and yelled words of encouragement to the players. People clapped at the end of each movement of a symphony, and often in the middle of the movement as well. After an exceptionally pleasing performance, listeners would demand that the piece be repeated immediately in an encore. If, on the other hand, the audience didn't like what it heard, it might express its displeasure by throwing fruit and other debris at the stage. Our modern, more dignified classical concert was a creation of the 19th century, when the musical compositions came to be considered works of high art worthy of reverential silence. Attending a classical concert requires familiarizing yourself with the music in advance. Nowadays this is easy. Go to YouTube and type in the titles of the pieces on the program. Enter Beethoven Symphony 5, for example. Several recorded versions will appear, and you can compare different interpretations of the same piece. Should you need information about the history of the work and its composer, try to avoid Wikipedia, which is often unreliable. Instead, go to the more authoritative Oxford Music Online Grove Dictionary of Music and search under the name of the composer. Choosing the right seat at a concert is important, too. What is best for viewing might not be best for hearing. In some concert halls the sound sails over the front seats and settles at the back. Often the optimal seat in terms of acoustics is at the back of the hall, in the first balcony. Sitting closer, on the other hand, allows you to watch the conductor and performers on stage. If you attend a concert of a symphony orchestra, sitting close allows you to follow the gestures that the conductor makes to the various soloists and sections of the orchestra. Like a circus ringmaster, he or she turns directly to the soloist of a given moment. The conductor conveys the main ideas and the emotion of the music to the players, and they in turn communicate these themes and moods to the audience. Figure 1-4. Schermerhorn Symphony Center, Nashville, Tennessee. Constructed in 2003-2006, the 1,800-seat auditorium is home to the Nashville Symphony as well as concerts of pop, cabaret, choral, jazz, and blues. If that isn't enough for music lovers in Nashville, right across the street is the Country Music Hall of Fame. AP Images Mark Humphrey. The Power of Classical Music, Two Famous Beginnings. All right, let the music begin. As in all artistic media that unfold over time, beginnings are crucial. If a composer, for example, doesn't capture your attention immediately, you may move on to the next track or hit the off button. To understand how classical music can grab and enthrall you, let's start with two famous beginnings, both of which are already well known to you. Ludwig van Beethoven, Symphony No. 5, Opening. The beginning of Beethoven's Symphony No. 5 is perhaps the best-known moment in all of classical music. Its short, gesture is as much an icon of Western culture as is the to be, or not to be, soliloquy in Shakespeare's Hamlet. Beethoven wrote this symphony in 1808 when he was 37 and almost totally deaf. How could a deaf person write a symphony? Beethoven could do so because musicians can hear with an inner ear, meaning that their brains can create and rework melodies without having to rely on externally generated sound. In this way, the nearly deaf Beethoven fashioned a powerful 30-minute symphony entirely inside his head. A symphony is a genre, or type, of music for orchestra, divided into several independent pieces called movements, each possessing its own tempo and mood. A typical classical symphony will have 4 movements with the respective tempos of fast, slow, moderate, and fast. A symphony is played by an orchestra, a large ensemble of acoustic instruments such as violins, trumpets, and flutes. Although an orchestra might play a concerto, an overture, or a dance suite, historically it has played more symphonies than anything else, and for that reason is called a symphony orchestra. The orchestra for which Beethoven composed his Fifth Symphony was made up of about 60 players, including string, wind, and percussion instruments. Beethoven begins his symphony with the musical equivalent of a powerful punch in the nose. The 4-pitch rhythm is quick and abrupt. It is all the more startling because the music has no clear-cut beat or grounding harmony to support it. Our reaction is one of surprise, perhaps bewilderment, perhaps even fear. The brevity of the opening rhythm is typical of what we call a musical motive, a short, distinctive musical figure that can stand by itself. In the course of this symphony, Beethoven will repeat and reshape this opening motive, making it serve as the unifying theme of the entire symphony. Figure 1, 5. A portrait of Ludwig van Beethoven painted in 1818-1819 by Ferdinand Skimen. Snark Art Resource, New York. Having shaken, even staggered, the listener with this opening blow, Beethoven then begins to bring clarity and direction to his music. The motive sounds in rapid succession, rising stepwise in pitch, and the volume progressively increases. Beethoven uses the crescendo of sound here to suggest a continuous progression. He is taking us from point A to point B, what we call in music and film a transition. Suddenly, the music stops, we have arrived. A French horn then blasts forth 6 pitches, as if to say, and now for something new. Indeed, new material follows, a lovely, flowing melody played first by the strings and then by the winds. Its lyrical motion serves as a welcome contrast to the almost primitive opening motive. Soon the motive reasserts itself, but it is gradually transformed into a melodic pattern that sounds more heroic than menacing, and with this Beethoven ends his opening section. In sum, in the opening of Symphony No. 5, Beethoven shows us that his musical world includes many different feelings and states of mind, among them the fearful, the lyrical, and the heroic. When asked what the opening motive of the symphony meant, Beethoven is reported to have said, "Their fate knocks at the door." In the course of all 4 movements of this symphony, Beethoven opens the door, takes our hand, and leads us on a fateful journey that includes moments of fear, despair, and, ultimately, triumph. Turn now to this opening section and to its listening guide below. Here you will see written music, or musical notation, representing the principal musical events. This notation may seem alien to you. But don't panic. Millions of people enjoy classical music every day without ever looking at a shred of written notation. For the moment, simply play the music and follow along according to the minute and second counter on your player. Richard Strauss, also Sprach Zarathustra, opening. Richard Strauss's name is not a household word, as is Beethoven's. Obscuring things further, there were 2 important composers named Strauss. 1. Johann Strauss, Jr. was Austrian and is known as the Waltz King because he wrote mainly popular waltzes. The other, Richard Strauss, was German and composed primarily operas and large, spectacular compositions for orchestra called tone poems. A tone poem is a one-movement work for orchestra that tries to capture in music the emotions and events associated with a story, play, or personal experience. In his tone poem Also Sprach Zarathustra, Richard Strauss tries to depict in music the events described in a novel of that title by the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. The hero of Nietzsche's story is the ancient Iranian prophet Zarathustra, who foretells the coming of a more advanced human, a Superman who will rescue the common herd of humanity from its stupidity and sloth. Strauss's tone poem begins with Zarathustra standing on the horizon at dawn. This is the moment at which the sun, and the superhero, arises. As the sounds unfold, the listener senses the dawn of a new age. While the imposing title Also Sprach Zarathustra may seem foreign, and the mention of German philosophy intimidating, Strauss's music is well known to you. It gained fame in the late 1960s when used as film music in Stanley Kubrick's 2001, A Space Odyssey. Since then it has sounded forth in countless film spoofs, as well as radio and TV commercials, to convey a sense of high drama. The music begins with a low rumble, as if coming from the depths of the earth. From this darkness emerges a ray of light as 4 trumpets play a rising motive that Strauss called the nature theme. The light suddenly falls dark, the hero has momentarily failed, and then the light rises again, ultimately to reach a stunning climax. How do you describe a sunrise and the advent of a superhero through music? Strauss tells us. The music should ascend in pitch, get louder, grow in warmth, and reach an impressive climax. Moreover, the leading instrument should be the trumpet, the sound of which has traditionally been associated with heroic deeds. Simple as these techniques may be, they are the means by which Strauss conveys musical meaning. The result is spectacular, overwhelming, a high point in the history of classical music. Nothing in the realm of classical or popular music can match it in terms of sheer sonic force. Figure 1:6. A fanciful depiction of the opening of Friedrich Nietzsche's Also sprach Zarathustra with the rise of the all-powerful sun. Illustration after Cindy Davis. See a video of Strauss's theme in Kubrick's 2001 in the YouTube playlist on the text website. Listening Exercise 1 Musical Beginnings. This first listening exercise asks you to review two of the most famous beginnings in all of classical music. Beethoven, Symphony No. 5, Opening. 1. Beethoven opens his Symphony No. 5 with the famous short long motive and then immediately repeats it. Does the repetition present the motive at a higher or at a lower level of pitch? A. Higher pitches. B. Lower pitches. 2. In this passage Beethoven constructs a musical transition that moves us from the opening motive to a more lyrical second theme. Which is true about this transition? A. The music seems to get faster and makes use of a crescendo. B. The music seems to get slower. 3. How does Beethoven add intensity to the conclusion of the transition? A pounding drum is added to the orchestra, and then a French horn plays a solo. B. A French horn plays a solo, and then a pounding drum is added to the orchestra. 4. Now a more lyrical new theme enters in the violins and is echoed by the winds. But has the opening motive really disappeared? A. Yes, it is no longer present. B. No, it can be heard above the new melody. C. No, it lurks below the new melody. 5. Student choice. How do you feel about the end of the opening section, compared to the beginning? A. Less anxious and more self-confident. B. Less self-confident and more anxious. 1, 2. To take this listening exercise online and receive feedback or email answers to your instructor, go to the text website. Strauss, Also sprach Zarathustra, Opening. 6. Which is true about the opening sounds? A. The instruments are playing several different sounds in succession. B. The instruments are holding one and the same tone. 7. When the trumpets enter and ascend, does the low, rumbling sound disappear? A. Yes. B. No. 8. When the trumpets rise, how many notes do they play? A. 1. B. 2. C. 3. 9. At the very last chord, a new sound is added for emphasis, to signal that this is indeed the last chord of the climax. What instrument is making that sound? A. A piano. B. An electric bass. C. A cymbal. 10. Student choice. You have now heard two very different musical openings, by Beethoven and Strauss. Which do you prefer? Which grabbed your attention more? Think about why. A. Beethoven. B. Strauss. The materials on the text website will help you understand and pass tests on the content of this chapter. In addition, you may watch Craig Wright's own lectures at OpenYale courses and complete this chapter's listening exercise interactively, as well as view active listening guides and other materials that will help you succeed in this course. Key words: music, popular music, classical music, acoustic instrument, lyrics, encore, symphony, movement, orchestra, symphony, orchestra, motive. Tone, poem. 2. Rhythm. Music can be defined as sound that moves through time in an organized fashion. It involves, therefore, the interaction of time and pitch. Rhythm, melody, and harmony are the building blocks of music, and how they are arranged affects the color, texture, and form, and, ultimately, the meaning of every musical composition. In discussing rhythm, melody, and harmony, we rely on terminology that developed alongside the practice of notating music. Musical notation is a system that allows us to represent sound on paper by means of special signs and symbols. In Western musical notation, the passing of time is represented by notes placed on a horizontal axis. with black notes moving more quickly than white notes. Pitch is shown on a vertical axis with the higher-placed notes representing higher pitches. Example 2-1a shows low, slow sounds that become progressively higher and faster, while example 2-1b shows the reverse. Watch a video of Craig Wright's Open Yale course class session 3, Rhythm, Fundamentals, at the text website. Example 2-1a. Example 2-1b. When we use musical notation, we in effect freeze a piece of music so that it can be reproduced exactly by performers at some later date. What is more, musical notation allows us to stop at any point. We can look at a composition as it stands still, talk about its various parts, and learn something about how the music is put together. You can derive great pleasure from listening to music, of course, without being able to read musical notation. Indeed, musical notation is wholly absent from most musical cultures around the world. But the enjoyment of Western classical music in particular can be enhanced if you understand how this music works, and to see how it works, it helps to understand musical notation. Rhythm and rhythmic notation. Rhythm is arguably the most fundamental element of music. Some rhythms are so recognizable that most of us don't need to hear the melody to identify the tune. Think of the opening of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony or Happy Birthday, for instance, which are recognizable even when just clapped. The primacy of rhythm, neurobiologists believe, is caused by the fact that the body's tempo and timings are controlled largely by the cerebellum, the oldest and most primitive part of the brain. We have a direct, even physical, response to rhythm. We can move to it, we can dance to its pulse. Rhythm, in the broadest definition, is the organization of time in music. More specifically, rhythm divides time into long and short spans. It gives a profile to the pitches of a melody, just as it does to the syllables of a text, whether long or short, as we see in the opening lines of Every Breath You Take by Sting and the Police. Every breath you take SSLLL. Every move you make SSLLL. Musical rhythms are supported and clarified by a beat. The beat is an even pulse that divides the passing of time into equal units. It may be strongly felt, as in a waltz by Johann Strauss or a hard rock number by the Rolling Stones, or it may be only vaguely sensed. As often happens in classical music. Usually, no one instrument consistently plays the beat, rather, our brains extract the beat from the mass of musical rhythms and accents we hear. But extract it we do. When we clap along with or tap our feet to music, we are reacting to what our brain says is the beat. The beat in music is most often represented by a unit of measurement called the quarter note, a basic duration in music. Normally, the quarter note moves along at roughly the rate of the average person's heartbeat, sometimes faster, sometimes slower. As you might suspect from its name, the quarter note is shorter in length than the half and the whole note, but longer than the eighth and the 16th note. These other note values account for durations that are longer or shorter than a single beat. Here are the symbols for the most used musical notes, with an indication of how they relate to one another in length. Figure 2-1. The fluid dance patterns of Michael Jackson show how rhythm can animate the body. Phil Dent Redfern's Getty Images. See Michael Jackson respond to and redefine the beat in the YouTube playlist on the text website. Example 2-2. To see the power of rhythm to take control of the body, watch Christopher Walken in action in the YouTube playlist on the text website. To help the performer keep the beat when playing or singing, the smaller note values, specifically, those with flags on the vertical stem, are beamed, or joined together, in groups of 2 or 4. Example 2-3. In vocal music, however, the beaming is broken when a syllable of text is placed below a note. Example 2-4. In addition to notes that signify the duration of sound, there are other signs, called rests, that indicate silence. For each note there is a corresponding rest of the same value. Example 2-5. You will have noticed that, in their basic form, adjacent note values in music all have a 2-to-1 ratio to each other, 1/2 note equals 2 quarter notes, and so on. But triple relationships can and do exist, and these are created by the addition of a dot after a note, which increases the duration of the note to 1 1/2 its original length. Example 2-6. To see how the various note values indicate the rhythm of an actual piece of music, consider the well-known tune Yankee Doodle. First, the text is given to refresh your memory. Next, the rhythm of the tune is indicated by horizontal lines of different lengths to show how long each pitch lasts. Then, the rhythm is presented in musical notation. Finally, the position of each beat in Yankee Doodle is indicated by quarter notes. Example 2, 7. Here's the patriotic song America arranged the same way. Example 2, 8. Meter. Notice in the preceding examples how vertical lines divide the music into groups of 2 beats in the case of Yankee Doodle and into groups of 3 beats in America. These strokes are called measure lines or bar lines. A measure, or bar, is a group of beats. Usually, there are 2, 3, or 4 beats per measure, although in some cases there can be more. The gathering of beats into regular groups produces meter. A musical composition does not usually present a steady stream of equally loud beats. Instead, certain beats are given emphasis over others in a regular and repeating fashion. The stressed beats are called strong beats, the unstressed beats, weak beats. If we stress every other beat, 1 2, 1 2, 1 2, we have 2 beats per measure and what is called duple meter. Similarly, if we emphasize every third beat, 1 2 3, 1 2 3, we have triple meter. Quadruple meter is common as well. Here is a familiar folk song notated in quadruple meter. Example 2, 9. And here is an equally well-known tune in sextuple meter. Example 2, 10. Most music, however, is written in duple, triple, or quadruple meter. Meter in music is indicated by a meter signature, 2 numbers, one on top of the other, placed at the beginning of the music to tell the performer how the beats of the music are to be grouped. The top number of the signature indicates how many beats there are per measure, the bottom number tells what note value receives the beat. Since, as we have said, the quarter note most often carries the beat, most time. Signatures have a 4 on the bottom. The 3 most frequently encountered time signatures are given here. Example 2, 11. Most music, classical as well as popular, is written in or. But because is in almost always merely a multiple or extension of, there are really only 2 meters that the beginning listener need be aware of, duple meter and triple meter, march meter and waltz meter, if you will. But how do we hear these and differentiate between them? Hearing meters. One way you can improve your ability to hear a given meter is to establish some sort of physical response to the music. As obvious as it might seem, it can be very helpful simply to tap your foot to the beat while moving along with the music in a way that groups the beats into measures of 2 or 3 beats. Perhaps the most precise way to move with the music is to adopt the same patterns of motion that conductors use to lead symphony orchestras and other musical ensembles. These patterns are cut in the air with the right hand. Here are the patterns that conductors use to show and meter. Example 2, 12. Notice that in both of these patterns, and indeed in all conducting patterns, the first beat is indicated by a downward movement of the hand. Accordingly, this first beat is called the downbeat. It represents by far the strongest beat in any given measure. In the downbeat is stronger, or more accented, than the upbeat, in the downbeat is more accented than either the middle beat or the upbeat. When listening to a piece of music, then, tap the beat with your foot, listen for the downbeat, and try to get your conducting pattern synchronized with the music. If you hear only one weak beat between each strong beat, the music is in duple meter, and you should conduct in time. If you hear 2 weak beats between each downbeat, on the other hand, you are listening to a piece in triple meter and should use the pattern. Try conducting Yankee Doodle and America in and, respectively. Example 2, 13. One final observation about meters and conducting patterns: almost all music that we hear, and especially dance music, has a clearly identifiable meter and a strong downbeat. But not all music starts with the downbeat. Often a piece will begin with an upbeat. An upbeat at the very beginning of a piece is called a pickup. The pickup is usually only a note or 2, but it gives a little momentum or extra push into the first downbeat, as can be seen in the following 2 patriotic songs. Example 2, 14. To sum up, to identify whether the meter of a piece is duple or triple, try using this simple 3-step approach. First, tap your foot or hand to the beat. Second, identify where the downbeat is falling. Where do you hear strong beats instead of weak beats? Third, conduct with the music and decide if you hear 1 or 2 weak beats between each strong beat. If there is only 1 weak beat between the strong beats, then the piece is in duple meter. If there are 2, then it is in triple meter. Syncopation. One of the ways to add tension and excitement to music is by the use of syncopation. In most music, the accent, or musical emphasis, falls directly on the beat, with the downbeat getting the greatest accent of all. Syncopation places the accent either on a weak beat or between the beats. Picture in your mind a grid with the beats falling on the vertical lines. Now picture notes, the syncopated notes, falling in between the lines. They contradict the prevailing beat, thereby adding tension to the music. A short example of syncopation can be heard in bar 2 of the chorus of the Beatles song, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. The arrows show the moments of syncopation. Watch a video of Craig Wright's Open Yale Course Class Session 4, Rhythm, Jazz, Pop, and Classical, at the text website. Example 2:15. A far more complex example of syncopation can be found in the popular theme song to The Simpsons. Example 2:16. Syncopation gives an unexpected bounce or lift to the music and is a prominent feature in Latin music and jazz. Listening exercise 2. Hearing meters. Now it's your chance to be the conductor. On your intro CD, track 4, you have 10 short musical excerpts, each played once. Conduct the music and identify the meter of each excerpt. To do this, you should listen for the beat, count 1, 2 or 1, 2, 3, and get your conductor's beat pattern in synchrony with the music. If you do this correctly, the completion of each full conductor's pattern will equal 1 measure. All pieces are in duple or triple meter. Write duple or triple in the following blanks. There are 5 examples in duple meter and 5 in triple. 4. To take this listening exercise online and receive feedback or email answers to your instructor, go to the text website. 1 meter, Murray, Rondo from Suite de Symphonies 2. Meter, Chopin, Waltz in E major. 3 meter, Beethoven, Variations on God Save the King 4. Meter, Prokofiev, Romeo and Juliet 5. Meter, Prokofiev, Romeo and Juliet. 6 meter, Bach, Brandenburg Concerto No. 5, 1 St. Movement. 7 meter, Mozart, A Little Night Music, First Movement 8. Meter, Haydn, Symphony No. 1, Third Movement 9. Meter, Bizet, Habanera, from Carmen 10. Meter, Handel, Minuet from Water Music. Tempo. The beat sets the basic pulse of the music. As beats are grouped into equal units, meter emerges. Rhythm is the durational pattern of longs and shorts superimposed over the meter. Tempo, finally, is the speed at which the beats progress. While the tempo of the beat can be fast or slow, it usually falls somewhere in the range of 60-90 beats per minute. We tend to feel slow tempos as relaxed or sad, and fast ones as energetic and happy. Tempo is indicated to the performer by means of a tempo marking placed at the beginning of the piece. Because tempo markings were first used in Italy, they are most often written in Italian. The following are the most common tempo indications, arranged from slow to fast. Grave largo lento adagio andante. Andantino moderato allegretto allegro vivace presto. Prestissimo. Very slow slow moderate. Fast very fast. Figure 2-2. Conductor Marin Alsop in rehearsal with the Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra, Royal Albert Hall. Arena Pal Topham the image work. Figure 2-3. Leonard Bernstein, one of the most forceful and flamboyant conductors of the 20th century. Copyright Erich Auerbach. Getty Images. As you might imagine, general tempo terms such as these allow for a good deal of interpretive freedom. Conductors like Marin Alsop and Leonard Bernstein, for example, have had very different notions of just how fast a movement by Beethoven marked allegro should go. A movement conducted by Bernstein can last 2 minutes longer than one directed by Alsop. In addition, composers often called for changes in tempo within a movement by placing in the score commands such as accelerando and ritardando. From this last Italian term, we derive the English word for a slowing down of the music, retard. Frequent changes in tempo can make it difficult for the listener to follow the beat, but they add much expression and feeling to the music. Watch a video of or download a recording of Don't Stop the Music in the YouTube and iTunes playlists on the text website. Don't Stop the Music. Rhythm, rap, hip-hop, and current dance music. Rhythm is an indispensable component of pop music. Some types of techno music repeat the same lyrics, melodies, and harmonies over and over, but the songs are still fun to listen to because the electronic rhythms shift and evolve over time. Certain traditional African musics feature relatively simple melodic and harmonic textures, but offer rhythmic complexity that surpasses that of most classical music. Rap music is perhaps the most prominent popular musical genre to privilege rhythm over melody and harmony. In rap, the vocal line is delivered more like speech than like song, rarely offering discrete pitches that can be notated precisely. Rap, however, is not only a type of rhythmic speech music, it is also a process commonly used in a larger genre called hip-hop. Hip-hop features a wide variety of rhythmic devices. In addition to rapping, DJs scratch records in complex rhythmic patterns. They also sample rhythms off older recordings and electronically manipulate them for new creative effects. Because of its strong emphasis on rhythmic processes, hip-hop has been a primary influence on current dance music. The following excerpt from Rihanna's dance tune, "Don't Stop the Music," illustrates the way popular dance songs mix different rhythmic devices to create a pulsating musical texture. In this excerpt, Rihanna uses syncopation, samples a rhythm from a famous pop song, and layers different rhythms on top of each other. The syncopation occurs from the very beginning. The upward-pointing arrows show the accent in the bass drum part, which plays every beat. The downward-pointing arrows show where Rihanna syncopates the melody. Look at the way Rihanna's part falls between, rather than on, the beats in those measures. The sample, Mama S.E. Mama S.A. Mama Ku S.A., is taken directly from Michael Jackson's "Wanna Be Startin' Somethin'" from Thriller, still the best-selling album of all time. But Jackson himself took this chant from Manu Dibango's Soul Makasa, commonly considered the first disco album. In this way, pop singers use the rhythms of other artists to create exciting new textures. In Rihanna's song, not only do the voices seem to integrate seamlessly, but they project a sense of music history to the sensitive listener who recognizes these references. In learning to listen to popular music as well as to classical, the more layers of music we understand, the greater our enjoyment. The materials on the text website will help you understand and pass tests on the content of this chapter. In addition, you may watch Craig Wright's own lectures at OpenYale courses and complete this chapter's listening exercise interactively, as well as view active listening guides and other materials that will help you succeed in this course. Key words: rhythm, beat, quarter note, measure, meter, duple meter, triple meter, quadruple meter. Meter, signature, downbeat, upbeat, pickup, accent, syncopation, tempo, retard, rap, hip-hop. 3. Melody. A melody, simply put, is the tune. It's the part we sing along with, the part we like and are willing to listen to again and again. TV pitchmen try to entice us to buy a CD set of the 50 all-time greatest melodies, but not a similar collection of rhythms or harmonies. Rhythm and harmony are merely supporting actors, melody is the star. The more the melody shines, the more beautiful the music. Pitch. Every melody is composed of a succession of pitches. Pitch is the relative position, high or low, of a musical sound. When an instrument produces a musical tone, it sets into motion vibrating sound waves that travel through the air to reach the listener's ears. A faster vibration will produce a higher pitch, and a slower one a lower pitch. The lowest key on the piano sets a string vibrating back and forth 27 cycles per second, while the highest key does the same at a whopping 4,186 times per second. Low pitches lumber along and sound fuzzy, while high ones are fleetingly clear. A low note can convey sadness, a high one excitement. By grouping individual pitches so as to sweep forward, reach a climax, and then achieve repose, composers from Mozart to Beethoven to John Lennon create great melodies. Watch a video of Craig Wright's OpenYale course class session 5, Melody, Notes, Scales, Nuts and Bolts, at the text website. The octave. Have you ever noticed, when singing a succession of tones up or down, that the melody reaches a tone that sounds like a duplication of an earlier pitch, but at a higher or lower level? That duplicating pitch is called an octave, for reasons that will become clear shortly. Pitches an octave apart sound similar because the frequency of vibration of the higher pitch is precisely twice that of the lower. The string that produces middle C on the piano vibrates 256 cycles per second, while the one generating the C an octave above does so 512 times per second. When men and women sing the same melody together, they almost invariably sing at the octave. While it may sound as if all voices are singing the same pitches, the women are in fact singing an octave higher, with their vocal cords vibrating exactly twice as fast as those of their male counterparts. All musical cultures, Western and non-Western, make use of the principle of octave duplication. But not all cultures divide the pitches within the octave the same way. In many traditional Chinese melodies, the octave is divided into 5 tones, resulting in wide spaces between pitches and giving the melodies an exotic, ethereal, floating sound to Western ears. Arabic melodies, by contrast, can divide the octave into up to 24 parts, resulting in extremely small spaces between pitches. This lends Arabic melodies their characteristic sound of sliding or bending between pitches. We in the West, however, beginning with Pythagoras and the ancient Greeks, have preferred melodies with 7 unequally spaced pitches within the octave. The 8th pitch duplicates, or doubles, the sound of the first, and is thus called the octave. During the early development of Western music, the 7 notes within the octave corresponded to the white keys of the modern keyboard. Eventually, 5 additional notes were inserted, and these correspond to the black keys. Example 3, 1. To get the sound of the octave in your ear, try singing Over the Rainbow and Take Me Out to the Ball Game. Both immediately rise exactly an octave, regardless of what pitch you sing at the beginning. Example 3, 2. Notating melodies. The type of notation used for the 2 tunes in example 3-2 is useful if you only need to be reminded of how a melody goes, but it is not precise enough to allow you to sing the tune from scratch. When the melody goes up, how far up does it go? More precision for musical notation began to appear in the West as early as the 11th century, when people started to write notes on lines and spaces so that the exact distance between pitches could be judged immediately. This grid work of lines and spaces, introduced in the previous chapter, came to be called a staff. The higher on the staff a note is placed, the higher its pitch. Example 3, 3. The staff is always provided with a clef sign to indicate the range of pitch in which the melody is to be played or sung. One clef, called the treble clef, designates the upper range and is appropriate for high instruments like the trumpet and the violin, or a woman's voice. A second clef, called the bass clef, covers the lower range and is used for lower instruments like the tuba and the cello, or a man's voice. Example 3, 4. For a single vocal part or a single instrument, a melody could easily be placed on either one of these 2 clefs. But for 2-hand keyboard music with greater range, both clefs are used, one on top of the other. The performer looks at this combination of clefs, called the great staff, and relates the notes to the keys beneath the fingers. The 2 clefs join at middle C. Example 3, 5. Each musical pitch can be represented by a letter name, as well as by a particular line or space on the great staff. We use only 7 letter names because, as we have seen, melodies were made up of only 7 pitches within each octave. As a melody extends beyond the range of a single octave, the series of letter names repeats. The note above G, then, is an A, which lies exactly 1 octave above the previous A. As music grew increasingly complex, the spaces between the white keys were divided and additional keys were inserted. This increased the number of pitches within the octave from 7 to 12. Because they were not originally part of the staff, the 5 additional pitches were not represented by a line or space, nor were they given a separate letter name. Instead, they came to be indicated by a symbol, either a sharp or a flat, applied to one of the existing notes. A sharp raises the note to the piano key immediately above, usually a black one, whereas a flat lowers it to the next key below, again usually a black one. A natural, on the other hand, cancels either of the 2 previous signs. Here, as an example of musical notation on the great staff, is a well-known melody as it might be notated for a chorus of male and female voices, the women an octave higher than the men. To keep things simple, the melody is notated in equal whole notes. Example 3, 6. Listening exercise 3. Hearing melodies. Pieces of classical music are sometimes long and complex. To keep track of everything that is going on, it helps to form a mental image, and maybe to make a quick sketch of the basic melodic contour. To familiarize you with this process, listening exercise 3 asks you to identify the melodic contour of 10 famous classical melodies. Each is first performed as the composer originally intended and then played again in a more deliberate fashion to allow you to focus on the individual pitches. For each excerpt, select the pattern of notes that most accurately represents the pitches of the melody. The higher the note on the staff, the higher the pitch. Don't worry about rhythm for this exercise. Scales, tonality, and keys. When we listen to a pop or classical melody, our brain hears a succession of pitches spaced out on a grid. That grid is a scale, a fixed pattern of tones within the octave that ascends and descends. If you prefer, think of the scale as a ladder with rungs or steps between the two fixed points, low and high, formed by the octave. You can go up or down the ladder, but not all the steps are an equal distance apart. The steps have arbitrary names, A, B, C, D, and so on. These are identifying tags that they have carried for more than 1,000 years. Since the 17th century, almost all Western melodies have been composed according to one of two 7-note grids, the major pattern and the minor one. Each has its own arrangement of 7 steps within the octave. Now things get technical, but the image of the piano keyboard provided in example 3 to 5 can help. Notice that there are no black keys between B and C and between E and F, a fault attributable to the way the ancient Greeks constructed the first scales. All the adjacent white notes of the keyboard are not the same distance apart. A distance between two pitches in music is called an interval. The interval between B and C is only half the size of that between C and D. B to C is a half step, while C to D is a whole step. The factor that distinguishes the major scale from the minor is the position of the two half steps. The major scale follows a 7-note pattern moving upward 1, 1, 1 half, 1, 1, 1, 1 half. The minor scale goes 1, 1 half, 1, 1, 1 half, 1, 1. Once the 8th pitch is reached, the pattern can start over again. Now the last piece of technical information: a major or minor scale may begin on any of the 12 notes within the octave, and thus there are 12 major and 12 minor scales. A major scale built on C uses only the white notes of the keyboard, as does a minor scale constructed on A. When begun on a note other than C or other than A, however, sharps and flats are needed to create the correct pattern of whole and half steps. Sharps and flats can be placed immediately before each note of the scale, or they can be grouped together at the beginning of the line in what is called a key signature. The key signature provides a key or guide, telling the musician which sharps or flats are to be applied throughout the piece. Here are the notes of the major and minor scales as they start on C and then on A. Example 3, 7. To repeat, we Westerners have been accustomed to hear the pitches of a melody unfold within one of two 7-note grids, either the major or minor scale. But not all pitches in the grid are created equal. Our brain hears one pitch as central and the others as gravitating around it. That central, or home, pitch is called the tonic. The tonic is the first of the 7 notes of the scale and, consequently, the 8th and last as well. Melodies almost invariably end on the tonic, as can be seen in Twinkle, Twinkle Little Star, which uses the C major scale and ends on C. The organization of music around a central pitch, the tonic, is called tonality. We can say that such and such a piece is written in the tonality of C major or of a minor, for example. More commonly, however, we say that the piece is written in the key of C or A. Thus, key, as with tonality, is something like a gravitational field that embodies both the scale of the melody and the strong pull of its tonic pitch. Figure 3, 1. Planets rotate around and are pulled toward the sun, just as outlying pitches are pulled toward the tonic pitch. Courtesy NASA JPL. Modulation. Modulation is the change from one key to another. Most short popular songs don't modulate, they stay in one key from beginning to end. But longer pieces of classical music need to modulate so as not to bore the listener. Modulation lends a dynamic sense of movement to music. As the composer Arnold Schoenberg said, modulation is like a change of scenery, like setting up camp in a new location. Modulations can be difficult to hear, however. The beginning listener may not know exactly where the music is going, but only sense that a change of key is occurring. Hearing major and minor. The choice of scale, whether major or minor, greatly affects the mood and emotional quality of the music. A melody in a major key sounds decidedly different from one in a minor key. To Western ears, major key melodies seem bright, cheery, and optimistic, whereas minor key ones come across as dark, somber, and even sinister. This difference is caused, not by acoustics, but by culture. Only during the last 500 years have Westerners perceived melody in this major equals happy, minor equals sad way. By contrast, in many countries of the Near East, minor melodies are the happiest tunes, those played at weddings, for example. To establish firmly in your mind's ear the difference between major and minor, try singing the following familiar songs. Example 3, 8. Composers over the centuries have manipulated the way we feel about their music by switching from major to minor or minor to major. Changing from major to minor, or from minor to major, is called a change of mode, from the major mode to the minor, or vice versa. Changing the mode certainly affects the mood of the music. To prove the point, listen to the following familiar tunes. In each the mode has been changed from major to minor by inserting a flat into the scale near the tonic note, thereby switching from the beginning of the major to that of the minor. Notice how this slight alteration sucks all the happiness, joy, and sunshine from these formerly major melodies. Example 3, 9. Now turn to listening exercise 4, which tests your ability to distinguish between melodies composed in major or minor. Listening exercise 4. Hearing major and minor. On your intro CD, track 7, you will find 10 musical excerpts that will help you begin to differentiate major from minor. Pieces in major usually sound bright, cheerful, and sometimes bland, whereas those in minor seem darker, more somber, mysterious, perhaps even exotic. In the blanks below, indicate whether each melody is in major or minor. 5 are in major and 5 in minor. 7. To take this listening exercise online and receive feedback or email answers to your instructor, go to the text website. 1. Key, Mussorgsky, Polish ox cart, from pictures at an exhibition. 2. Key, Mussorgsky, Great Gate of Kiev, from pictures at an exhibition. 3. Key, Mussorgsky, Goldenberg and Schmeil, from pictures at an exhibition. 4. Key, Tchaikovsky, Dance of the Reed Pipes, from the Nutcracker. 5. Key, Tchaikovsky, Dance of the Reed Pipes, from the Nutcracker. 6. Key, Murray, Rondo from Suite to Symphony. 7. Key, Handel, Minuet from Water Music. Eight. Key, Prokofiev, Dance of the Nights, from Romeo and Juliet. 9. Key, Vivaldi, Violin Concerto, The Spring, First Movement. 10. Key, Vivaldi, Violin Concerto, The Spring, First Movement. Other scales. Most Western melodies, both classical and popular, are written in either the 7-note major or the 7-note minor scale. But there is a third scale that sometimes takes charge, the chromatic scale, which makes use of all 12 pitches, equally divided, within the octave. Chromatic is a good word for this pattern because the additional 5 pitches do indeed add color and richness to a melody. In the chromatic scale, all 12 pitches are just a half step apart. Irving Berlin incorporates the chromatic scale at the beginning of his holiday song, White Christmas. Example 3, 10. Example 3, 11. Although the major, minor, and chromatic scales regulate most of the music we hear, there are other melodic patterns in the West and elsewhere. The medieval Catholic Church once had a set of 8 church modes for its religious music, and our own blues scale is essentially a 6-note pattern. And, as we shall see in chapters 29 and 31, other scalar arrangements of 5, 6, 7, and 8 tones can be heard in the music of Russia and China, for example. As with food from around the world, so with scales, there are many local specialties. Melodic structure. A great melody does not have to be a complex one. Ludwig van Beethoven demonstrated this when he fashioned his Ode to Joy, a melody he composed for the last movement of his Symphony No. 9. So beloved has this tune become that it has been used as a Christmas carol, a hymn for the United Nations, a film score, a symbol in a science fiction story, and background music in countless TV commercials. Below, the melody is notated in the bass clef in D major, the key in which Beethoven composed it, with the original German text translated into English. Example 3, 12. We can make a few general observations about Beethoven's melody. First, notice that each pitch is very close to the next. The melody moves mainly by whole or half steps. Clearly, Beethoven wanted to keep this melody simple so that all the world could sing it. Next, notice that it starts in a strange way. It doesn't sound secure at the beginning because it commences on the third degree of the scale rather than the first. Melodies don't have to begin on the tonic, they just have to end there. Now look at the overall structure of the tune. Beethoven has composed 4 melodic phrases, each 4 bars in length, symmetry at its best. A phrase in music functions much like a phrase or clause within a sentence, serving as an important part of a larger whole. The initial phrase opens the melody and ends on a note other than the tonic. The second phrase answers this idea and returns the melody to the tonic. 2 phrases that work in tandem this way are called antecedent and consequent phrases. One opens, the other closes. Beethoven then pushes off in a new direction. The music gains momentum by means of a repeating rhythmic figure in measures 10, 11, and reaches a musical climax in measure 12 with the only 2 large intervals in the melody. The fourth and final phrase is an almost exact repeat of the second phrase, with the exception of one important detail. Beethoven brings the return of this phrase in 1 beat early, a bit of rhythmic syncopation, thereby confounding the symmetry and giving his melody an unexpected lift. The melodic structure of Beethoven's Ode to Joy, balanced groups of 4-bar phrases arranged as antecedent, consequent, expansion, consequent, is found frequently in the works of Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven from the 18th and 19th centuries. Antecedent, consequent pairs also appear regularly in popular songs of 19th and 20th century America. Think of the tune, When the Saints Go Marching In, for example. Watch a video of Craig Wright's Open Yale Course Class Session 6, on what makes a great melody, Mozart and Wagner, at the text website. Antecedent phrase, Oh when the saints go marching in, oh when the saints go marching in. Consequent phrase, Oh how I want to be in that number, when the saints go marching in. You may have been singing antecedent, consequent phrases all your life and not been aware of it. To prove the point, try singing a few phrases from Stevie Wonder's You Are the Sunshine of My Life, The Who's Pinball Wizard, or Billy Joel's Piano Man. Listening exercise 5. Hearing melodic structure. Ludwig van Beethoven, Ode to Joy from Symphony No. 9. 8. To take this listening exercise online and receive feedback or email answers to your instructor, go to the text website. On your intro CD, track 8, you have an excerpt from the last movement of Beethoven's Symphony No. 9, in which his famous Ode to Joy can be heard. You are probably familiar with the tune already, but look at it again as it is given on page 31. Try to get the antecedent, consequent, and expansion phrases firmly in your ear. Now listen to the music on your CD. The melody is actually heard 4 times, stated and then repeated 3 times with a new and different orchestration for each repeat. As the 4 statements unfold, the music grows in power and majesty. First presentation of the melody, just listen. Midnight, 009, 017, 024, B. Equals consequent, 033, 047. 1. Second presentation. What happens during this second presentation of the melody? A and B repeat but C and B do not. B, C and B repeat but A and B do not. 2. Third presentation. What happens during this third presentation? A and B repeat but C and B do not. B, C and B repeat but A and B do not. 3. Fourth presentation. What happens during this fourth and final presentation? A and B repeat but C and B do not. B, C and B repeat but A and B do not. 4. What might we conclude from this? A. Beethoven wanted to achieve variety and thus changed the order of the repetition of the phrases in successive presentations. B. Beethoven knew he was onto a good thing and presented the phrases in the same order during each presentation. Now listen more generally to Ode to Joy. 5. Does the tempo in each of the 4 presentations vary greatly from one to the next? A. Yes. B. No. 6. 7. Why is this melody, though inspiring, easy to remember? A. It has many heroic leaps in it. B. It moves mostly in pitches a step apart. C. It is somewhat repetitious. 8. 10. Why does Ode to Joy grow in power and majesty as Beethoven orchestrates it in the 4 successive presentations that you heard? A. The tempo gets increasingly slower and grander. B. Each presentation is louder than the preceding one. C. It grows in richness as more and more instruments enter in each new presentation. D. A chorus enters to sing of the joy of unity and a common humanity. E. Heroic brass instruments enter in the fourth and final presentation. Hearing melodies and phrases. As we have seen, melodies are made up of musical phrases. When listening to a piece of music, whether a classical symphony or a popular song, we tend to follow along with the phrases. For the most part, we do this intuitively. We instinctively hear where a phrase begins and where it ends. Beethoven's Ode to Joy is composed of 4 symmetrical phrases, each 4 measures, or bars, in length, as is typical of the music of the classical period. In music history. But the same is true for most of our popular music. Look back over the musical examples we have seen thus far, Over the Rainbow, Take Me Out to the Ball Game, and Rihanna's Don't Stop the Music, to choose just a few. Almost all of them are made up of 4-measure phrases that are joined to other 4-measure phrases to form longer units of 8 or 16 measures. The reason that so much of the music we hear sounds solid and pleasing to us is because of its 4-square structure. Whether in architecture, poetic meter, or music, a symmetrical structure makes us feel comfortable. Having followed the phrase structure in Beethoven's Ode to Joy, now go on to do so in Louis Armstrong's version of the jazz song, Willie the Weeper. Perhaps because of its highly symmetrical structure or simply because of its long-lasting popularity, this style of jazz is known as classical New Orleans jazz. Figure 3.2. Louis Armstrong at the age of 32. Copyright Michael Oakes Archives Corbis. Listening Exercise 6. Counting measures and phrases. 9. To take this listening exercise online and receive feedback or email answers to your instructor, go to the text website. Louis Armstrong was born in poverty in New Orleans in 1901 but went on to become the most famous jazz musician of the 20th century. Armstrong's powerful, in-your-face style of trumpet playing can be heard prominently in this 1927 recording of the song, Willie the Weeper. Your task here is to count the number of measures, or bars, in each musical phrase. Armstrong's Willie the Weeper is in a straightforward duple meter. First, listen for a bit and tap your foot with the beat, which here goes slightly faster than your heartbeat. Every 2 of your taps forms 1 measure. Start counting the number of measures in each phrase. After the 4-measure introduction, every phrase is either 8 or 16 measures in length, so fill in the blanks accordingly. The answer for the first phrase is provided. 4-measure introduction. Full band. Number of measures, 16. Full band varies the tune. Number of measures. Trombone and tuba solo. Number of measures. Trombone and tuba repeat. Number of measures. Trombone solo. Number of measures. Extraordinary clarinet solo. Number of measures. Armstrong plays trumpet solo. Number of measures. Piano solo. Number of measures. Guitar solo. Number of measures. Armstrong plays trumpet solo. Number of measures. Trumpet, trombone, and clarinet improvise around tune. Number of measures. The materials on the text website will help you understand and pass tests on the content of this chapter. In addition, you may watch Craig Wright's own lectures at Open Yale courses. And complete this chapter's listening exercises interactively, as well as view active listening guides and other materials that will help you succeed in this course. Key words. Melody, pitch, octave, staff, clef, treble, clef, bass, clef, great, staff, sharp, flat, natural, scale, interval, major scale, minor scale, key, signature, tonic, tonality, key, modulation, mode, chromatic, scale, phrase, antecedent phrase, consequent phrase. 4. Harmony. Melody provides a lyrical voice for music, rhythm gives vitality to that voice, and harmony adds depth and richness to it, just as the dimension of depth in painting adds a rich backdrop to that visual art. Although melody can stand by itself, it is most often supported by a harmony, an accompaniment that enriches it. Melody and harmony work gracefully together, the one carrying the central idea above, the other supporting it below. Sometimes, however, discord arises, as when a singer strumming a guitar fails to change the chord to make it agree with the melody. The melody and harmony now clash, they are out of harmony. As the double sense of this last statement suggests, the term harmony has several meanings. In the broader sense, harmony is the peaceful arrangement of diverse elements. When applied specifically to music, harmony is said to be the sounds that provide support and enrichment, an accompaniment, for melody. Finally, we often speak of harmony as if it is a specific event in the accompaniment. For example, we say the harmony changes, meaning that one chord in the accompaniment gives way to the next. Thus, we might say that the song, "Oh, What a Beautiful Morning," from the musical, Oklahoma, is a harmonious piece, harmonized in the key of C major, and that the harmony changes 8 times. Figure 4.1. Claude Monet, Water Lily Pond, Pink Harmony. Monet's painting of this famous bridge at Giverny, France, reveals not only the harmonious qualities of nature, but also the painter's ability to harmonize various colors into a blend of pastels. Lauros Giroudon, the Bridgeman Art Library. Example 4.1. Image not available due to copyright restrictions. Watch a video of Craig Wright's Open Yale course Class Session 7, Harmony, Chords and How to Build Them, at the text website. Building harmony. Chords are the building blocks of harmony. A chord is simply a group of 3 or more pitches that sound at the same time. When we learn to play guitar or jazz piano, we first learn mainly how to construct chords. The basic chord in Western music is the triad, so called because it consists of 3 pitches arranged in a very specific way. Here is a C major triad. Example 4.2. Note that it comprises the 1st, 3rd, and 5th pitches of the C major scale. The distance between each of the pitches is, again, called an interval. C to E, spanning 3 letter names, is the interval of a third. E to G, again spanning 3 letter names, is another third. Triads always consist of 2 intervals of a third placed one on top of the other. Here are triads built on every note of the C major scale. Example 4.3. Here many pop songs built on just a IV6 4-chord progression, in 4 chords, 36 songs, in the YouTube playlist on the text website. These triads provide all the basic chords necessary to harmonize a melody in C major. Notice that each of the chords is given a Roman numeral, indicating on which note of the scale the triad is built, and that the triads built on I, IV, and V are called the tonic, subdominant, and dominant chords, respectively. We have already met the tonic note in our discussion of melody. It is the central pitch around which a tune gravitates and on which a melody usually ends. Similarly, the tonic chord, or triad, is the home chord of the harmony. It is the most stable and the one toward which the other chords move. The dominant triad, always built on the 5th note of the scale, is next in importance. A dominant triad is usually followed by a tonic one, especially at the end of a musical phrase, where such a movement helps create a strong concluding statement. The subdominant triad is built on the 4th note of the scale and is called the subdominant because its pitch is just below the dominant. The subdominant often moves to the dominant, which in turn moves to the tonic, creating the succession 4, V, I. Just as words in a sentence must come in a certain order so as to conform to the rules of grammar, so chords in a musical phrase have a generally expected order and intent. A movement of chords in a purposeful fashion is called a chord progression. The individual chords in a chord progression seem to pull each other along, one giving way to the next, with all ultimately gravitating toward the powerful tonic harmony. But why is it necessary for chords to change? The answer lies in the fact that the pitches of a melody continually change, sometimes moving through all the notes of a scale. But a single triadic chord can only be harmonious, or consonant, with the 3 notes of the scale that it contains. A tonic triad in C major, for example, can only harmonize with the melody notes C, E, and G. In order to keep the harmony consonant with the melody, then, chords must continually change. If they do not, dissonance results. Finally, the notes of a triad need not always come in all at once, but can be spaced out over time. Such a broken, or staggered, triad is called an arpeggio. The name derives from arpa, the Italian word for harp, because the harp often plays the notes of a chord not together, but in succession. Arpeggios can appear either as part of the melody or, more often, in the harmony that supports a melody. An arpeggio used in an accompaniment gives the listener the sense that the harmony is more active than it really is. In example 4-4, the beginning of "Oh, what a beautiful morning" is harmonized with the supporting triads spaced out and repeated as arpeggios. These chords are the same as in example 4-1, but now the harmony seems more active because one note of the accompanying triad is sounding on every beat. Example 4-4. Image not available due to copyright restrictions. Consonance and dissonance. You have undoubtedly noticed, when pressing the keys of the piano at one time or another, that some combinations of keys produce a harsh, jarring sound, while others are pleasing and harmonious. The former chords are characterized by dissonance, and the latter by consonance. In physical terms, chords that contain pitches that are very close to one another, just a half or a whole step apart, sound dissonant. On the other hand, chords that involve a third, a somewhat larger interval, are usually consonant, as is the case for each triad in example 4-3. But culture, and even personal taste, plays a role in dissonance perception, too. What is a disagreeable dissonance to one listener at one moment may be a delight to another at some other time. In fact, in the West our appreciation of dissonance has changed over the centuries. A chord that sounded wildly dissonant in the Renaissance sounds consonant to modern ears. And, as bands such as Metallica have shown, we can get used to a lot of dissonance. Dissonant chords add a feeling of tension and anxiety to music. Consonant ones produce a sense of calmness and stability. As with tension-filled movements in life, dissonant chords seek out, want to move to, consonant resolutions. The continual flux between dissonant and consonant chords gives Western music a sense of drama, as a piece moves between moments of tension to longed for resolution. Cadences. In music as well as the other narrative arts, endings can be as important as beginnings. They tell us how things turned out and what we have learned from the experience. The end of a musical phrase usually finishes with a consonant chord. The end of an entire piece almost always ends so. We like happy endings. The portion of a musical phrase that leads to its last chord is called a cadence. Usually, a cadence encompasses the final 2, 3, 4, or 5 notes of the melody and its accompanying chords. Just as there are often internal phrases within a long sentence, so there are internal phrases, each with a cadence, in a melody. Similarly, just like punctuation marks in written prose, the 4 main musical cadences express varying degrees of emphasis and finality. One cadence, sounding restful and peaceful, is called the Amen cadence, for it is often heard in religious services. Another surprises us, indeed deceives us, and, appropriately, is called the deceptive cadence. Another, the half cadence, doesn't finish the phrase, doesn't end on the tonic, but leaves us hanging, quizzical, waiting for more. And finally, and most emphatically, the authentic cadence brings with it a feeling of real conclusion, as if to say, the end. Cadences can come in any order, although pieces almost always end with an authentic cadence. A composer such as Bach, as might a great storyteller, lays out a succession of musical phrases that tell a lengthy tale, with moments of tranquility, uncertainty, and... Watch comedian Dudley Moore parody a cadence in the YouTube playlist on the Text website. Hearing the harmony change. The first step in listening to harmony is to focus your attention on the bass, separating it from the higher melody line. Chords are often built on the bass note, and a change in the bass from one pitch to another may signal a change in chord. Concentrating on the bass might not be easy at first. Most of us have always thought that listening to music means listening to melody. Certainly, hearing melody is crucial. But the bass is next in importance, and it rules supreme in a sort of subterranean world. It grounds the chords and determines where the harmony is going, more so than the higher melody. Baroque music usually has a clear, driving bass line, and hard rock music perhaps even more so. Next time you listen to a rock song, follow the electric bass instead of the melody and lyrics. See if you can sense when the chords are changing and when you have reached a chord that feels like the home key. Listening exercise 7 will help you follow the bass line as you enjoy the famous Pachelbel canon. It is easy to hear in this piece because it repeats, again and again. Any element of music that continually repeats is called an ostinato. Pachelbel's ostinato bass has been used in popular songs by rapper Coolio, Blues Traveler, Vitamin C, The Beatles, and others. Listening exercise 7. Hearing the bass line and harmony. Johann Pachelbel, Canon in D major. 11. To take this listening exercise online and receive feedback or email answers to your instructor, go to the Text website. When we listen to music, most of us naturally concentrate on the highest sounding part, which is where the melody is usually to be found. To hear harmony, however, we need to focus on the lowest sounding line, the bass. In Johann Pachelbel's famous four-part canon in D major, there is a canon in the upper three parts. Below this canon, however, Pachelbel writes a solitary bass part moving very slowly. This bass supports the canon that unfolds above. As with most bass lines, here the lowest part establishes the foundation for the harmony above each of its pitches. In this piece the bass with chords enters first, and then the canon gradually unfolds. Focus now on the bass and answer the following questions. 1. The bass enters first. At what point does the first violin enter? A. Midnight B. 012 C. 021. 2. Listen again to the beginning. How many pitches do you hear before the violin enters and the bass begins to repeat? In other words, how many pitches are there in the bass pattern? A. 4B, 6C, 8. 3. Are all the pitches within the pattern of the bass held for the same duration? A. Yes. B. No. 4. Therefore, the rate of harmonic change in Pachelbel's canon is what? A. Regular. B. Irregular. 5. Which diagram most accurately reflects the pitches of the bass line? 6. Listen now to more of the composition. The bass is highly repetitious as the pattern recurs again and again. Each statement of the pattern lasts approximately how long? A. 12 seconds. B. 15 seconds. C. 20 seconds. 7. A melody, harmony, or rhythm that repeats again and again in music is called what? A. A pizzicato. B. A legato. C. A tempo. D. An ostinato. 8. Now listen up to 154 of the recording. Does the bass pattern ever change? A. Yes. B. No. 9. From the beginning of the piece to this point, how many times do you hear the pattern? A. 8. B. 10. C. 12. D. 14. 10. Listen all the way to the end of the work. Does Pachelbel ever vary his bass and his harmonic pattern? A. Yes. B. No. Chord changes in the blues. The continually repeating bass line in Johann Pachelbel's canon is unusual in classical music. In most classical pieces, the bass and the resulting chords do not repeat in a regular fashion, and that makes hearing the harmonic changes difficult. Yet in popular music, sensing when the harmony changes can be easier because it is more common for a succession of chord changes to repeat over and over again in exactly the same pattern. Rock music of the 1950s and 1960s frequently repeats 3 or 4 chords without varying their order. Similarly, harmonic repetition occurs in the blues, an expressive, soulful style of singing that unfolds above repeating chord changes. Although there are several variants, the standard harmony of the blues involves just 3 chords, tonic, subdominant, and dominant, which are spread out over 12 measures, or bars. Within the 12-bar blues pattern, however, each chord does not sound for the same length of time. The first tonic holds for 4 bars, while all subsequent chords sound for just 2 bars. Once completed, the pattern repeats again and again, until the singer is finished. Watch a video of Craig Wright's Open Yale Course Class Session 8, Bass Patterns, Blues and Rock, at the text website. For further explanation of the 12-bar blues, watch How to Learn Blues Chord Progressions, Volume 1, in the YouTube playlist on the text website. Chord changes in doo-wop. Finally, a bit of pure fun, let's listen to chord changes in a special kind of soul music called doo-wop. Doo-wop emerged in the 1950s as an outgrowth of the gospel hymns sung in African American churches in urban Detroit, Chicago, and New York. Often doo-wop was simply improvised on the street because it was direct and repetitive. The lyrics made use of repeating phrases, such as doo-wop, doo-wah, or shoo-wop and shoo-be-doo, and such words were sung in a cappella harmony below the tune. Invariably, the harmony was a short chord progression, the most common of which went I, 6, 4, V and repeated over and over again. Because anyone could sing along, this sort of music became enormously popular, sweeping to the top of the hit parade. And you can sing it, too. In the doo-wop song Duke of Earl by Gene Chandler, you'll hear the bass voice lead, not with do, 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 but with duke, 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 setting the foundation for the chords that soon enter in the other voices and instruments. The tempo is moderately fast, and each of the 4 chords lasts for 1 bar in meter. Thus, every fourth beat coincides with a new chord, and the pattern repeats approximately every 9 seconds. Moreover, every time the harmony sings the word Earl, the chords change. As you listen to this doo-wop classic, sing along with the bass, no matter what your vocal range. Anyone can hear these chord changes. The materials on the text website will help you understand and pass tests on the content of this chapter. In addition, you may watch Craig Wright's own lectures at Open Yale courses and complete this chapter's listening exercise interactively, as well as view active listening guides and other materials that will help you succeed in this course. Key words: harmony, chord, triad, interval, dominant, subdominant, chord progression, arpeggio, dissonance, consonance, cadence, ostinato, blues, 12-bar blues, doo-wop. Dynamics and color. 5. As we have seen, rhythm, melody, and harmony constitute the primary elements of music. In order for a musical composition to be conveyed to a listener, however, these abstract concepts must be translated into concrete musical sounds. This is accomplished when musical instruments and voices transform the composer's ideas about rhythm, melody, and harmony into actual sound waves. We use the terms dynamics and color to describe the particular character of these musical sounds as they are performed by the various instruments or voices. Our response to dynamics and musical color is immediate. For example, we may be struck by a certain passage, not so much because of its pitches or rhythm, but because of a sudden, dynamic shift from very quiet to very loud, or because the melody is played by a brilliant-sounding trumpet. Dynamics and color, then, refer not so much to a musical idea itself, but instead to the way in which that musical idea is presented. Dynamics. In all music, dynamics are the various levels of volume, loud and soft, at which sounds are produced. Dynamics work together with tone colors to affect the way we hear and react to musical sound. For example, a high note in the clarinet has one quality, shrill and harsh, when played fortissimo, and quite another, vague and otherworldly, when played pianissimo. Figure 5.1 shows a computerized representation of the waveforms of a clarinet playing pianissimo and then fortissimo. Because they were first used by composers working in Italy, the terms for musical dynamics are traditionally written in Italian. Below are the most common terms and the musical symbols for them. Figure 5.1. Computerized digital waveform of about 10 seconds of sound of a clarinet playing soft and loud. The narrower the vertical lines, the softer the sound. Term. Musical symbol definition: fortissimo FF. Very loud forte. F. Loud. Mezzo forte MF. Moderately loud mezzo piano. Moderately soft piano. P. Soft pianissimo PP. Very soft. Dynamics sometimes change abruptly, for special effects. Most common among these quick changes is the sforzando, a sudden, loud attack on one note or chord. A famous sforzando occurs in the second movement of Joseph Haydn's Surprise Symphony, for example, in which the composer interrupts a soft melody with a thunderous crash on a single chord. His intent was apparently to awaken those listeners who might have dozed off. In the world of pop music, Nirvana was known for using dynamic contrast in its songs, with soft, relaxed verses that explode into loud, raucous choruses. Listeners feel the immense excitement of these choruses partly because they are pitted against the more subdued verses. This exemplifies the importance of dynamic contrast in creating exciting pieces of music. But changes in dynamics need not be sudden and abrupt. They can be gradual and extend over a long period of time. A gradual increase in the intensity of sound is called a crescendo, while a gradual decrease is called either a decrescendo or a diminuendo. Ludwig van Beethoven was a master at writing long crescendos. The transition to the last movement of his Symphony No. 5 comes upon the listener like a tidal wave of sound. An equally impressive crescendo can be heard at the beginning of Richard Strauss's Thus Spoke Zarathustra as the full orchestra gradually enters. Spectacular moments such as these remind us that in music, as in marketing and communications, generally the medium can be the message. Color. Simply stated, color in music is the tone quality of any sound produced by a voice or an instrument. Timbre is another term for the tone quality of musical sound. Instruments produce sounds of different colors because they are constructed in different ways and from different materials. We need not understand the acoustical properties of the various instruments to appreciate that they sound different. We can all hear that the sound of a flute has a much different tone quality than does that of a trombone. Similarly, the voice of pop singer Rihanna has a different timbre than that of opera star Renee Fleming, even when the two produce the same pitches. Because the human voice was probably the first instrument to make music, it provides an appropriate starting point for our investigation of musical color. The voice. The human voice is an instrument of a very special sort that naturally generates sound without the aid of any kind of mechanical device. It is highly expressive, in part because it can produce a wide range of sounds and do so at greatly contrasting dynamic levels. Each voice has a distinctive timbre. We need hear only a few notes of a song to know that this is the sound, for example, of Pavarotti, or Beyoncé or Bono. When we sing, we force air up through our vocal cords, causing them to vibrate. Men's vocal cords are longer and thicker than women's, and for that reason the sound of the mature male voice is lower. Voices are classified by range into four principal parts. The two women's vocal parts are the soprano and the alto, and the two men's parts the tenor and the bass. The soprano is the highest voice, and the bass the lowest. When many voices join together, they form a chorus. The soprano, alto, tenor, and bass constitute the four standard choral parts. In addition, the area of pitch shared by the soprano and alto is sometimes designated as a separate vocal range called the mezzo-soprano, just as the notes adjoining the tenor and bass are said to be encompassed by the baritone voice. The voice is capable of producing many different styles of singing: the raspy sound of a blues singer, the twang of the country balladeer, the gutsy belt of a Broadway star, or the lyrical tones of an operatic soprano. We all try to sing, and we would like to sing well. How well we do, and what kind of sound we produce, depends on our training and our physical makeup. The lungs, vocal cords, throat, nose, and mouth are all involved in the production of vocal sound. Musical instruments. Why do musical instruments sound the way they do? Have you ever wondered why a flute or violin sounds the way it does, why it has a distinctive timbre? The answer rests in a basic law of musical acoustics. When a string vibrates or air rushes through a column in a wind instrument, or even in a Coke bottle, more than one sound is actually produced. We hear a basic sound, called the fundamental, but a string, for example, vibrates not only in its full length but simultaneously in parts of the string, and these fractional vibrations produce many very, very faint sounds, called overtones. Generally, the larger the fraction, the louder the sound of the overtone. But each type of instrument, be it trumpet or oboe, manifests a distinctive pattern of overtones, depending on the instrument's material and design. The degree of prominence of particular overtones blending with the fundamental gives an entire family of instruments its distinctive sound. Figure 5.3 shows the overtone series of the G string of a violin. Notice how there is no straight line descent as the overtones sound all at once. Overtone 7 is faint, but number 8 asserts itself strongly. Although other issues are at play, the proportions of the overtones, just like the mix of various coffees in the holiday blend at Starbucks, gives each instrument its unique color. Watch a video of Craig Wright's Open Yale Course Class Session 2, Introduction to Instruments and Musical Genres, at the text website. Figure 5.2. The diagram demonstrates that when a string vibrates, subsets of it also vibrate, thereby producing other faintly heard pitches called overtones. Figure 5.3. The overtone series of a violin playing the G string arranged to show degree of loudness. It is the particular mix of the faint overtones that gives each type of instrument its distinctive sound. See and hear a demonstration of the overtone series for a piano and a trumpet at timbre, overtones, and pedal tones in the YouTube playlist on the text website. Instrument families. Musical instruments come in groups, or families, instruments of one general type that have similar materials and design. The Western Symphony Orchestra traditionally includes 4 such groups. The first is the string family, so called because sound is produced by plucking or bowing the strings of these instruments. The second and third groups are the woodwind and brass families. In both groups, music is generated by blowing air through various pipes or tubes. In the fourth group, the percussion family, sound is produced by striking a suspended membrane, a block of wood, or a piece of metal with a stick of some kind. In addition, there is a fifth group of instruments, the keyboard instruments, which are not normally part of the symphony orchestra. The organ, harpsichord, and piano are the main keyboard instruments, and they make sound by means of keys and pipes. Or keys and strings. The organ is usually played alone, while the piano is most often heard either by itself or as an accompaniment to another instrument or the voice. See a video of all the instruments in Benjamin Britten's Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra, as well as keyboard videos, at the text website. Strings. Generally, when we speak of string instruments in Western music, we broadly include all instruments that produce sound by means of vibrating strings: the guitar, banjo, ukulele, and harp, as well as the violin and its close relatives, the viola, cello, and double bass. But the guitar, banjo, ukulele, and harp usually produce their sound when plucked, whereas the violin and its relatives are normally played with a bow, not just plucked. Indeed, it is their use of a bow, along with their distinctive shape, that identifies the four members of the violin group. We traditionally associate these instruments with classical music. The guitar, banjo, ukulele, and harp, on the other hand, have their origins in folk music. Figure 5.4. This photo of the American group the Brentano String Quartet shows the relative size of the violin, viola, and cello. Christian Steiner Courtesy Brentano String Quartet. Violin group. The violin group constituted the original core of the symphony orchestra when it was first formed during the Baroque era. In terms of numbers of players, the violins, violas, cellos, and double basses still make up the largest part of any Western symphony orchestra. A large orchestra can easily include as many as 100 members, at least 60 of whom play one of these four instruments. The violin is chief among the string instruments. It is also the smallest, it has the shortest strings and therefore the highest pitch. Because of its high range and singing tone, it often is assigned the melody in orchestral and chamber music. The violins are usually divided into groups known as firsts and seconds. The seconds play a part slightly lower in pitch and subordinate in function to the firsts. The sound of the violin is produced when a bow is pulled across one of four strings held tightly in place by tuning pegs at one end of the instrument and by a tailpiece at the other. The strings are slightly elevated above the wooden body by means of a supporting bridge. Different sounds or pitches are produced when a finger of the left hand shortens, or stops, a string by pressing it against the fingerboard. Again, the shorter the string, the higher the pitch. Because each of the four strings can be stopped quickly in many different places, the violin possesses both great range and agility. The strings themselves are made of either animal gut or metal wire. The singing tone of the violin, however, comes not so much from the strings as from the wooden body, known as the sound box, which amplifies and enriches the sound. The better the design, wood, glue, and varnish of the sound box, the better the tone. The viola is about 6 inches longer than the violin, and it produces a somewhat lower sound. If the violin is the string counterpart of the soprano voice, then the viola has its parallel in the alto voice. Its tone is darker, richer, and more somber than that of the brilliant violin. You can easily spot the cello in the orchestra because the player sits with the instrument placed between his or her legs. The pitch of the cello is well below that of the viola. It can provide a low bass sound as well as a lyrical melody. When played in its middle range by a skilled performer, the cello is capable of producing an indescribably rich, expressive tone. The double bass gives weight and power to the bass line in the orchestra. Because at first it merely doubled the notes of the cello an octave below, it was called the double bass. As you can see, the double bass is the largest, and hence lowest sounding, of the string instruments. Its job in the orchestra, and even in jazz bands, is to help set a solid base for the musical harmony. Figure 5.5. Double bass player Israel Cachow Lopez. Copyright Alexander Tamargo Getty Images. The members of the violin group all generate pitches in the same way. A bow is drawn across a tight string. This produces the traditional, penetrating string sound. In addition, a number of other effects can be created by using different playing techniques. Vibrato: by shaking the left hand as it stops the string, the performer can produce a sort of controlled wobble in the pitch. This adds richness to the tone of the string because, in fact, it creates a blend of two or more pitches. Pizzicato: instead of bowing the strings, the performer plucks them. With this technique, the resulting sound has a sharp attack, but it dies away quickly. Tremolo: the performer creates a musical tremor by rapidly repeating the same pitch with quick up and down strokes of the bow. Tremolo creates a feeling of heightened tension and excitement when played loudly, and a velvety, shimmering backdrop when performed quietly. Trill, the performer rapidly alternates between two distinctly separate but neighboring pitches. Most instruments, not just the strings, can play trills. Mute, if a composer wants to dampen the penetrating tone of a string instrument, he or she can instruct the player to place a mute on the strings of the instrument. The harp. Although originally a folk instrument, one found in virtually every musical culture, the harp is sometimes added to the modern symphony orchestra. Its role is to add its distinctive color to the orchestral sound and sometimes to create special effects, the most striking of which is a rapid run up or down the strings called a glissando. Figure 5.6. The harp's unique special effect is its glissando, a rapid run up and down the strings that seems to fill the atmosphere with energized sound. Copyright Francisco Cruz Superstock. Woodwinds. The name woodwind was originally given to this family of instruments because they emit sound when air is blown through a wooden tube or pipe. The pipe has holes along its length, and the player covers or uncovers these to change the pitch. Today, however, some of these woodwind instruments are made entirely of metal. Flutes, for example, are constructed of silver, and sometimes gold or even platinum. As with the violin group, there are four principal woodwind instruments in every modern symphony orchestra: flute, oboe, clarinet, and bassoon. In addition, each of these has a close relative that is larger or smaller in size and that possesses a somewhat different timbre and range. The larger the instrument or length of pipe, the lower the sound. The lovely, silvery tone of the flute is probably familiar to you. The instrument can be rich in the lower register and then light and airy on top. It is especially agile, capable of playing tones rapidly and moving quickly from one range to another. Figure 5.7. A flute, two clarinets, an oboe, and a bassoon. The flute, clarinet, and oboe are about the same length. The bassoon is nearly twice their size. Conselmer, Inc. The smaller cousin of the flute is the piccolo. It can produce higher notes than any other orchestral instrument. And though the piccolo is very small, its sound is so piercing that it can always be heard, even when the full orchestra is playing loudly. The clarinet produces sound when the player blows against a single reed fitted to the mouthpiece. The tone of the clarinet is an open, hollow sound. It can be mellow in its low notes but shrill in its high ones. It also has the capacity to slide or glide smoothly between pitches, and this allows for a highly expressive style of playing. The flexibility and expressiveness of the instrument have made it a favorite with jazz musicians. A lower, larger version of the clarinet is the bass clarinet. The oboe is equipped with a double reed, two reeds tied together with an air space in between. When the player blows into the instrument through the double reed, the vibrations create a nasal, slightly exotic sound. It is invariably the oboe that gives the pitch at the beginning of every symphony concert. Not only was the oboe the first non-string instrument to be added to the orchestra, but it is a difficult instrument to tune. Thus, it's better to have the other instruments tuned to it than to try to have it adjust to them. Related to the oboe is the English horn. Unfortunately, it is wrongly named, for the English horn is neither English nor a horn. It is simply a larger version of the oboe that originated on the continent of Europe. The English horn produces a dark, haunting sound, one that was especially favored by composers of the Romantic period. The bassoon functions among the woodwinds much as the cello does among the strings. It can serve as a bass instrument, adding weight to the lowest sound, or, because of its very wide range, it can act as a soloist in its own right, playing high, lyrical passages. When playing moderately fast or rapid passages as a solo instrument, it has a dry, almost comic tone. There is also a double bassoon, usually called the contrabassoon. Its sound is deep and sluggish. Indeed, the contrabassoon can play notes lower than any other orchestral instrument. Because the keys are far apart, one has to have fairly large hands to play it. The bassoon, contrabassoon, and English horn are all double-reed instruments, just like the oboe. Their tones, therefore, may sound more vibrant, even more exotic, than the mellow sounds of the single-reed instruments like the clarinet and saxophone. Strictly speaking, the single-reed saxophone is not a member of the symphony orchestra, though it can be added on occasion. Its sound can be mellow and expressive but also, if the player wishes, husky, even raucous. The expressiveness of the saxophone makes it a welcome member of most jazz ensembles. Brasses. Like the woodwind and string groups of the orchestra, the brass family consists of 4 primary instruments: trumpet, trombone, French horn, and tuba. Brass players use no reeds, but instead blow into their instruments through a cup-shaped mouthpiece. By adjusting valves or moving a slide, the performer can make the length of pipe on the instrument longer or shorter, and hence the pitch lower or higher. Everyone has heard the high, bright, cutting sound of the trumpet. Whether in a football stadium or an orchestral hall, the trumpet is an excellent solo instrument because of its agility and penetrating tone. The trumpet sounds forth with special brilliance at the beginning of Strauss's Thus Spoke Zarathustra. When provided with a mute, the trumpet can produce a softer tone that blends well with other instruments. Although distantly related to the trumpet, the trombone plays in the middle range of the brass family. Its sound is large and full. Most important, the trombone is the only brass instrument to generate sounds by moving a slide in and out, thereby producing higher or lower pitches. Needless to say, the trombone can easily slide from pitch to pitch, sometimes for comical effect. For the sound of the trombone, turn to 15 at 0:35. Figure 5, 8. Members of the Canadian brass, with the French horn player at the left and the tuba player at the right. Photograph by Martin Reichenthal courtesy of Opening Day Entertainment for the Canadian brass. The French horn was the first brass instrument to join the orchestra, back in the late 17th century. Its sound is rich and mellow, yet somewhat veiled or covered. The French horn was especially popular during the Romantic period, because the horn's traditional association with the hunt and with alpine mountains suggested nature, a subject dear to the hearts of the Romantics. It is easy to confuse the sound of the French horn with that of the trombone, because both are middle-range brass instruments and have a full, majestic tone. But the sound of the trombone is somewhat clearer and more focused, and its attack more direct, than that of the French horn, which can sound muffled. The tuba is the largest and lowest sounding of the brass instruments. It produces a full, though sometimes muffled, tone in its lowest notes. Like the double bass of the violin group, the tuba is most often used to set a base, or foundation, for the melody. On occasion, the tuba itself is assigned a melodic line, as in picture 4 of Mussorgsky's pictures at an exhibition here. The tuba demonstrates the melodious upper range of the instrument in a lengthy solo. Figure 5, 9. 3 mouthpieces for brass instruments. Copyright Christoph Lebrecht Music and Arts. Percussion. Percussion instruments are those that are struck in some way, either by hitting the head of a drum with a stick or by banging or scraping a piece of metal or wood in one fashion or another. Some percussion instruments, like the timpani, produce a specific pitch, while others generate sound that, while rhythmically precise, has no recognizable musical pitch. It is the job of the percussion instruments to sharpen the rhythmic contour of the music. They can also add color to the sounds of other instruments and, when played loudly, can heighten the sense of climax in a piece. The timpani is the percussion instrument most often heard in classical music. Whether struck in single, detached strokes or hit rapidly to produce a thunder-like roll, the function of the timpani is to add depth, tension, and drama to the music. Timpani usually come in pairs, one instrument tuned to the tonic and the other to the dominant. Playing only these pitches, the timpani feature prominently at the beginning of Strauss's Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Figure 5, 10. Timpanist Jonathan Haas of the American Symphony Orchestra. The rat-tat-tat-tat of the snare drum, the dull thud of the bass drum, and the crashing ring of the cymbals are sounds well known from marching bands and jazz ensembles, as well as the classical orchestra. None of these instruments produces a specific musical tone. The xylophone, glockenspiel, and celesta, however, are 3 percussion instruments that do generate specific pitches. The xylophone is a set of wooden bars that, when struck by 2 hard mallets, produce a dry, wooden sound. The glockenspiel works the same way, but the bars are made of metal so that the tone is brighter and more ringing. The celesta, too, produces sound when hammers strike metal bars, but the hammers are activated by keys. As in a piano, the tone of the celesta is bright and tinkling, a delightful, celestial sound, as the name of the instrument suggests. To hear the celesta playing in Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker, turn to 322 at 008. Figure 5, 11. The xylophone, a fixed-pitch percussion instrument on which can be played a fully chromatic scale of several octaves. C Squared Studios Getty Images. Keyboard instruments. Keyboard instruments, which are unique to Western music, boast highly intricate mechanisms. The pipe organ, harpsichord, and piano are the West's principal keyboard instruments, and they originated at markedly different times. The pipe organ, which traces its origins back to ancient Greece, is by far the oldest. It works according to the following principle: the player depresses a key that allows air to rush into a pipe, thereby producing sound. The pipes are arranged in separate groups according to their shape and material. Each group produces a full range of musical pitches with one special timbre. When the organist wants to add a particular musical color to a piece, he or she simply pulls a knob, called a stop. The most colorful, forceful sound occurs when all the stops have been activated. The several keyboards of the organ make it possible to play several musical lines at once, each with its own timbre. There is even a keyboard for the feet. The largest fully functioning pipe organ in the world is in the Cadet Chapel of the United States Military Academy at West Point, New York. It has 270 stops and 18,408 pipes. Figure 5:12. A 3-manual pipe organ with only small pipes visible. Notice the stops in the pedal keyboard below. Figure 5:13. A 2-manual harpsichord built by Pascal Taskin, preserved in the Yale University Collection of Musical Instruments, New Haven, Connecticut. Photo Joseph Zusfai Carl Kaufman courtesy Yale University Collection of Musical Instruments. The harpsichord was played in northern Italy as early as 1400, but it reached its heyday during the Baroque era. It produces sound not by means of pipes but by strings. When a key is depressed, it drives a lever upward that in turn forces a pick to pluck a string. The plucking creates a bright, jangling sound. Some harpsichords are equipped with 2 keyboards so that the player can change from one group of strings to another, each with its particular tone, color, and volume of sound. The harpsichord has one important shortcoming, however: the lever mechanism does not allow the performer to control the force with which the string is plucked, so each string always sounds at the same volume. The piano was invented in Italy around 1700, in part to overcome the dynamic limitations of the harpsichord. In a piano, strings are not plucked, they are hit by soft hammers. A lever mechanism makes it possible for the player to regulate how hard each string is struck, thus producing softs and louds. During the lifetime of Mozart, the piano replaced the harpsichord as the favorite domestic musical instrument. By the 19th century, every aspiring household had to have a piano, whether as an instrument for real musical enjoyment or as a symbol of affluence. Even today, the piano stands as a domestic status symbol. Figure 5:14. Pianist Lang Lang. Copyright Patrick Seeger DPA Corbis. Whereas the organ's familiar home is the church, where it is heard in association with religious services, the versatile piano can be found almost everywhere. With equal success, it can accompany a school chorus or an opera singer, it can harmonize with a rock band when in the hands of an Elton John or a Billy Joel, or it can become a powerful, yet expressive, solo instrument when played by a virtuoso such as Lang Lang. The harpsichord, on the other hand, is used mainly to recreate the music of the time of Johann Sebastian Bach. View a video demonstration of the organ, harpsichord, and piano at the text website. The Symphony Orchestra. The modern Western Symphony Orchestra is one of the largest and certainly the most colorful of all musical ensembles. It originated in the 17th century and has continually grown in size since then. When at full strength, the symphony orchestra can include upward of 100 performers and nearly 30 different instruments, from the high, piping piccolo down to the rumbling contrabassoon. A typical seating plan for an orchestra is given in Figure 5:15. To achieve the best balance of sound, strings are placed toward the front, and the more powerful brass is at the back. Other seating arrangements are also used, according to the special requirements of the composition to be performed. Surprisingly, a separate conductor was not originally part of the orchestra. Only around the time of Beethoven, when the orchestra was already 200 years old, was it thought necessary to have someone stand before it and direct the players. Indeed, the conductor functions something like a musical traffic cop. He or she makes sure that the cellos don't crash into the violins and that the oboe yields to the clarinet at the proper moment so the melody can be heard. The conductor follows an orchestral score, a composite notation of all the instrumental parts for a particular piece. Figure 5:16 shows the orchestral score of the beginning of Beethoven's Symphony No. 5. Obviously, Beethoven had to put many notes on the page to achieve just a few seconds of music. It is the job of the conductor to follow, and perhaps memorize, the orchestral score and then pick out any incorrectly played pitches and rhythms in this complicated web of instrumental sounds. To do this, he or she must have an excellent musical ear. Watch a video of Craig Wright's Open Yale Course Class Session 12, Guest Conductor, Saybrook Youth Orchestra, at the text website. Figure 5:15. Seating plan of a symphony orchestra. Bibliothèque Nationale, Paris. You have now been introduced to the principal instruments of the Western Symphony Orchestra, as well as the West's three main keyboard instruments. Listening exercises 8, 10 test your ability to recognize orchestral instruments and are